Welcome. This is Democracy Undecided. Today, we will talk about the economic structure of countries. In simple terms, we will explain how an economy works so that in the future videos, it's easier to understand why countries develop the way they do. Democracy and the legal system set the frame in which a society lives. They determine how decisions are made, how citizens take part in power, and how fair the courts are. But those frames would be empty without economy. The economy gives democracy real substance. It creates jobs, shapes living standards, and opens opportunity for development. If democratic institutions guarantee equal rights and justice ensures fairness, the economy answers another question. Does a person have enough income to exercise those rights? And can the state finance its obligation to society? In this sense, analyzing the economy is logical continuation of our look at political and legal systems. This is where it becomes clear how politics and law turn into real well-being for citizens. Why do some countries become rich and stable while others remain trapped in poverty? Why do Switzerland or Japan, without large reserves of minerals or other natural resources, rank among the most advanced nations, while others with huge resources do not reach the same level? The answer lies in how their economies are organized. An economy is not just the GDP numbers or growth rates. It is a living system where people, businesses, and the state constantly interact. We are all part of it. We work, earn income, spend money, create demand for goods and services, and businesses and the state respond to our actions. All this forms a closed loop of production and consumption, on which a country's prosperity depends. In a healthy economy, this loop runs smoothly. People earn enough, buy goods and services, businesses make profits and can expand, the state collects taxes and funds social programs. But if one link fails, the loop begins to break. If wages are low while producers set prices are high, people stop buying, demand falls, firms lose customers, cut output and jobs, and the state undercollect taxes. On paper, the economy exists, but in reality it degrades. This gap between incomes and prices can be seen in many countries. To understand why an economy grows or stagnates, we looked at it through the lens of production factors. Classical economics speaks of four: capital, labor, land, and technology. A modern view adds a fifth one: energy, without which none of the others can function. The economy is a closed cycle of production and consumption, and within it, there is another crucial element: savings and investments. Again, people work, receive wages, spend part on daily needs, and set part aside. Those savings do not vanish, they turn into investments via bank loans, capital markets, or public development programs. Investment, in turn, finances new factories, equipment, upgrades, and infrastructure. That is how gross fixed capital formation occurs, the creation of new productive capacity. The higher a nation's savings, the more room there is to invest in the future. If savings are scarce, a country must borrow abroad and become dependent on external creditors. The balance between what people spend today and what they are willing to invest for tomorrow determines whether the economy will grow steadily or remain stuck in consumption without any growth. So let's go back to factors. The first factor of economic production is capital, which in narrow sense means money. It is the finance that animates all other factors: paying for labor, renting or buying land, funding research, purchasing machinery, and securing energy for production. In a broader sense, capital is a bridge between past and future. In the past, it financed factories and equipment. that still operate today. Today, it flows into innovation and resources that will deliver results tomorrow. Capital links generations, turning ideas into assets. At the center of the economy is always the human being. The second factor is a human labor, or simply people. A person contributes work, an inventor creates new technology, and the same person is the consumer, who buy goods and services. People work the land, fields, and farms, or in their enterprises, using assets created by capital. They start up machines, run computers, and conduct experiments in labs. And after receiving wages, they spend them on goods produced in the same economy, sustaining the closed loop. The human being is the center around which all other factors revolve. Land and resources are where everything begins. This includes not only farmland, but also water, forests, minerals, and even clean air. Some countries are rich in resources, but that alone doesn't guarantee prosperity. Conversely, countries with limited resources like Switzerland find other paths to grow, investing in education, technology, and finance. Technology and innovation are brain of the economy. They determine how efficiently capital is used, how fast labor productivity grows, and what new goods can appear on the market. This is not only about inventions, but also business models, management approaches, and digital solutions. What seems innovative today becomes routine tomorrow and part of the capital base on which the new production is built. Energy is the fuel of economy, without which the other factors are powerless. No factory runs, no transport moves, no schools or hospital functions without energy. Today, energy is increasingly treated as a separate factor of production, alongside land, labor, technology, and capital. It shapes not only an economy's possibilities, but also its independence. Is the country self-sufficient, import-dependent, or shifting to renewables? Affordable energy is critical for growth. When energy is expensive, production costs rise, goods lose competitiveness, and investment slows. Stable and low-cost energy, on the other hand, opens space for individual development, innovation, and long-term growth. Countries use different energy sources: oil and petroleum products, natural gas, coal, nuclear, hydropower, solar, wind, biomass and biogas, and geothermal. And the specific mix forms the national energy balance. It's called supply mix. A country's economy, independence, and competitiveness depend on how much it relies on imports, whether it has its own reserves, and how actively it develops renewable sources. So the economy is not a set of abstract graphs or figures. It is a system where capital, land, technology, energy, and above all, people constantly interact. It's not enough to possess the factors of production. They must be used efficiently. Capital should be invested in development, land should yield real returns, technology should drive innovation, and energy should be accessible and affordable. But the greatest emphasis today is on people. Education, health, skills, and the ability to apply them at work determine how much an economy can grow. That's why the effective use of human potential is becoming the key measure of economic strength. No wonder the World Bank created the Human Capital Index, which shows how well countries actually use the potential of their citizens. An economy can function as a harmonious cycle that delivers development and well-being, or it can misfire, creating stagnation and sense of dead end. That is exactly what we will study in each episode of our series: how the cycle works in different countries, which factors reinforce it, and which ones undermine it. In the end, the goal of an economy is not machines or metrics, but people's well-being. Modern economies have long spilled beyond national borders. Today, value chains are long and complex, and increasingly international. This means a single finished product can consist of dozens or even hundreds of components made in different countries. Tech products like smartphones or cars are extremely complex. Raw materials from one region, electronics from another, software from a third. This global integration enables high-tech goods, but it also makes economies more vulnerable. A disruption at one node can affect the price and availability of the product worldwide. As a result, price growth is harder to predict and control. Managing the economy becomes more complicated, depending not only on domestic decisions, but also on external forces shaped by global markets. If global value chains reveal interdependence in production, then the domestic market and consumption reflects everyday life and the real strengths of an economy. What people buy and how they buy it at home determines the stability of internal demand. When most goods are domestically produced, money stays in the economy, supporting jobs and taxes. When consumption heavily relies on imports, money flows abroad and domestic production weakens. Consumption patterns also say a lot about development. Are most expenses going to basic food, housing, utilities? Or does a larger share go to education, leisure, culture, and innovative services? The structure of consumption shows whether an economy supports not only survival, but also a high standard of living. The balance between domestic and imported goods becomes a key indicator of resilience and independence. Consumer preferences show what people consider important and necessary in their lives. They are shaped not only by income but also by culture, tradition, and even public policy. In some countries, like Canada, people consciously choose local goods, supporting domestic producers even if they are pricier. In other imports win due to prestige, greater variety, or lower cost. These preferences shape the whole economy. They determine which sectors will grow and which will fade. For example, if society actively invests into healthy food or renewable energy, those markets grow faster. If consumers focus only on cheapness, the economy can become import dependent and lose its own competitive edge. Prices and inflation are what people feel most directly. When we talk about inflation, we mean not only official figures, but also how purchasing power changes. If prices rise faster than the wages, people effectively become poorer. They can afford less even if their nominal income hasn't fallen. This hits consumption and therefore the whole economy, breaking the balance between demand and production. Real incomes are directly tied to access to housing and basic needs. If wages grow more slowly than rent or food prices, people must cut spending, seek cheaper options, or even move to lower cost regions. Housing becomes a key indicator here. It shows whether the economy can provide not only jobs, but decent living conditions. Housing is one of the most sensitive industries for purchasing power. When supply doesn't keep up with the demand, prices jump. Even as wages grow, the share of income devoted to rent or mortgages increases. Families then spend less on other goods and services, suppressing domestic demand and slowing other sectors. Thus, an imbalance in just one substantial industry, housing, can trigger ripple effects across the entire economy. Inflationary pressure, lower consumption, and social tension, as well as declining trust in public policy. That's why it is crucial to balance not only the overall economy, but also individual industries. Housing makes it especially clear how inflation and system-wide stability are formed. There is also the phenomenon of perceived or subjective inflation. Sometimes official data show 2 or 3% price growth, yet people say everything has doubled. That's because different groups have different consumption baskets. Some spend more on food, others on housing or transport. The inflation seen in statistics and the inflation felt at the checkout can differ greatly. And it is the perceived inflation that most strongly shapes public sentiment and trust in government. Trade and openness show how integrated an economy is into the world system. For small countries like Switzerland, exports can make up half of GDP or more, and national well-being depends on global markets. But an open economy is always a risk. International crises, trade wars, or supply disruptions quickly affect domestic prices and employment. Beyond trade in goods and finance, the investment dimension matters. A truly strong economy leaves room for small and medium sized entrepreneurs. If conditions make investments available only to big corporations, a country ends up with a few strong sectors but lose diversification. Without diversification, there is no stability. A shock in one industry can paralyze the entire economy. When the system supports small businesses through credit, tax relief, and easy market entry, it becomes flexible and resilient to external shocks. So openness is measured not only by export and import volumes, it also the ability to create good conditions for entrepreneurship at home so that external integration doesn't break internal balance, but instead makes the economy more diverse and resilient. Macroeconomic indicators are like a plane's dashboard. They show direction and speed, but not the whole picture on their own. The best known metric is GDP per capita. It helps compare living standards, but it doesn't show how wealth is distributed. A country can have high GDP, but huge inequality, where a small minority lives comfortably while the majority struggles. Unemployment is another key indicator. It shows how well the economy creates jobs. But what matters is not only the rate, but the job quality. Is it stable work with a decent pay or short-term contracts with low income? Taxes and fiscal policy reflect the balance between state, business, and society. High taxes can fund strong social programs, but if collected inefficiently, even a heavy tax burden won't deliver a result. What matters is not only how much money reaches the budget, but how it's spent. If taxes fund good infrastructure, healthcare, education, and social protection, citizens see the results and are more willing to pay. If money disappears into corruption, trust in the state falls, along with tax compliance. There is also the Human Development Index, HDI, which connects the economy with the quality of life, education, longevity, and income. Taken together, these indicators show whether the economy benefits the majority or whether growth exists only on paper. That's why we always analyze them in combination. Only then can we see how strong and stable a country really is. Demography is the foundation of any economy. A young, numerous population provides a large workforce and strong demand, but also needs jobs, housing, education, and social services. An aging population, as in most of Europe and in Switzerland, reduces the number of active workers and increases pressure on pensions and healthcare. Governments must balance rising support costs for older people with investments in the future, education, innovation, and infrastructure. Social programs reflect how well a country can ensure fair, distribution, and basic security. Pensions, healthcare, education, and family support form the social contract between the state and the society. When these programs are properly funded and efficient, people feel stable and trust the state. When they are underfunded or work only on paper, dissatisfaction grows and political instability can follow. Thus, demography and social programs are tightly linked. Population structure defines needs, and the level of public support defines how well those needs are met. Together, they shape long-term economic resilience, whether a country can withstand future challenges or get stuck in aging and social crises. An economy breathes with its population, and immigration often plays the role of lungs, feeding the labor market with people and ideas. In aging countries, migration can maintain worker numbers, close gaps in critical professions, and boost innovation. But immigration is not just arithmetic. It shifts demand, housing, transport, education, healthcare, affect wages, complementing or competing with local, and shapes the tax base. In the short term, sharp inflows strain infrastructure and push up rents. In the long term, if integration is well managed, the economy benefits from a broader skill mix, more entrepreneurship, and higher growth potential. Demographic dynamics are not only about migration, but also natural change, births, deaths, and life expectancy. A young population lifts consumption and labor supply, but needs schools and first jobs. Aging raises pension and healthcare costs, forcing a search for balance between fiscal stability and social fairness. Internal mobility also matters. People move between regions, changing the local labor markets, price levels, and pressure on city services. The key is the quality of integration. Recognizing qualifications, language courses, access to small business credit, and fast work permits turn immigration from a cost into an investment. When people can quickly work in their profession, they pay taxes sooner, start companies, create jobs, and buy the goods the same economy produces. If integration fails, informal work grows, trust falls, and migration is seen as the burden. In our analysis, we will look not only at net migration or fertility, but also labor market inclusion, employment among the foreign-borns, housing affordability, pressure on schools and hospitals, wage dynamics in low and mid-paid sectors, as well as trust and social cohesion. This combination shows whether a country turns demographic change into an advantage or lets it destabilize the system. Social programs show how effectively the state turns collected resources into real well-being. At the core are pensions, family support, assistance for unemployed and people with disabilities, and funding for education and healthcare. Healthcare is especially important. Access to quality care directly affects workforce productivity and life expectancy. When people know illness won't bankrupt them, it builds economic stability. Levels of social spending differ across countries, but the principle is the same. Where the state invests in people, the return comes as higher trust, better education, and healthier, more productive workforce. If programs are underfunded or insufficient, a double squeeze appears. Citizens lose confidence in the future, and the economy gets less return from its own people. In today's world, social spending is not a budget burden, but an investment in the economy's foundation. It determines whether society can withstand aging labor market shocks and global crises. To compare countries fairly, we use international indicators. They provide objective benchmarks, and show a nation not only in its own mirror, but in a global context. The Heritage Index of Economic Freedom shows how easily it is to do business, invest, and trade. The UN's Human Development Index combines economic results with quality of life, education, and longevity. The World Bank Be Ready Index shows how easily it is to start and grow a business. OECD data on social spending help us to see how the state supports citizens and whether taxes come back as real services. Together, these metrics form our dashboard for analyzing economies around the world. They help reveal strengths and weaknesses and explain why some countries prosper while others struggle. We have covered all these aspects for a reason. Capital, labor, land, technology, energy, consumption, inflation, trade, demography, and social programs are not abstractions. They are the mechanisms that shape life in every country. Our goal is to give you tools and a simple, structured way to look at economies so that in the future episodes you can track these effects yourself in any country. To do this, we will use international indices and data from respected economic and financial sources: the World Bank, the UN, the OECD, Transparency International, the World Justice Project, and many others. This will let us see not only figures in tables, but the real impact of economic processes on people's lives, and ultimately understand why some countries grow while others stall. In the end, quality of life rests on economic balance. It is the duty of every state and of the politicians elected by the people to find the right equilibrium between production and consumption that ensures citizens' well-being. When institutions act responsibly and the economy grows in a balanced way, the result is not only better metrics, but its shared sense of stability and confidence in tomorrow. So, follow the online resources we recommend to stay educated and understand how the world economy works. You can also watch this video in Ukrainian or Russian on our channel. This is Democracy Undecided. Thank you for being with us and see you in the next episodes.